So we made a documentary film called The Barkley Marathons, the race that eats its young. That's what people in the race for many years have called the race. And it is at its core, I guess, about the story of an ultra marathon, which is about 130 miles long. It takes place in Tennessee every year. And when we started the film, it had been going on for 25 years and only 10 people had ever finished the race. They call it the hardest trail race in the world. It was created to be at the absolute limit of human capability. And they only allow about 40 people to enter it every year. It's a secret how you apply. It's a secret how you enter. There's a very selective process as how you would get into this race. You're on your own. You get a map and a compass. There's no aid stations. It also has fascinating American historic beginnings having to do with a famous prison escape. To us, it's really a sort of human story and a slice of life into this weird, bizarre thing that happens in the woods of Tennessee that people come from all over the world to do. And they really hold it as one of the most important things that they will do in life. That's a short synopsis, I guess.
That was great. That was really good.
You're listening to NewsHour from the BBC. Coming up in the programme, we're going to be talking to the founder of an endurance race so tough, hardly anyone has ever finished it.
You always have to keep people a little off guard.
First rule of Barkley is don't talk about it. If you talk about it, then you're not going to be part of it.
So it's kind of secret.
It kind of weeds itself out. If you belong here, you would find out how to get here.
This is about you by yourself against all that out there.
How did the Barkley start, or where did you get the idea?
The James Earl Ray escape, where that he'd gotten out of the prison into this area, and we were familiar with it because we'd hiked up here for some years, and because when trail running started to become popular, and we thought it was amazing that people were running astounding times on trails. We didn't really have a picture in our mind of what kind of trails they were running. We thought of trails like this. We had pretty well said, man, this would be such a, I guess the only term, it would be a ball buster of a race.
In 2012, Timothy Kane and Annika Iltis found themselves standing at a cliff's edge.
Like, it would have been us standing on a cliff for a year or us jumping off within a matter of weeks.
I think we were both at a point in our, not so much our careers, but just maybe in our lives where we realized how much time we were spending helping other people bring their creative visions to life. And I think we both had this creative urge in us to, from the beginning, tell a story that we were interested in.
Timothy and Annika had worked for years in the film industry. They were both in the camera department and both camera assistants. And in fact, they had both met on the set of the movie Step Brothers. I'm sure you've seen this film where John C. Reilly and Will Ferrell play deadbeat man-children whose single parents get married, and reluctantly, the boys become stepbrothers.
Let's play a game, all right? On the count of 3, name your favorite dinosaur. Don't even think about it. Just name it. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Velociraptor.
Favorite non-pornographic magazine to masturbate to.
Good Housekeeping.
If you were a chick, who's the one guy you would sleep with?
John Stamos.
What? Did we just become best friends?
Yup.
You want to go do karate in the garage?
Yup.
We started with 2 cameras, but then eventually we had 3 cameras. And it was very free form. You know, they would do a scripted take, keep the camera rolling, and then just start letting them ad lib. And they would just roll 3,000 feet out in no time.
Every take. I had to run on set and bring 3,000-foot mags back, reload them all within basically 9 minutes, which is 1,000 feet of film, basically. They called themselves the Rollout Kings, John C. Reilly and Will Ferrell. They were like wore it as a badge.
At the end of Step Brothers, Annika and Timothy continued to work together on other high-caliber shows, the most recent being Mad Men, and that's actually where this story begins. Timothy and Annika were wrapping on season 4 of Mad Men. They had been working long hours, they were burnt out, and little did they know it, but the course of their lives was about to change.
You know, that was a great show to work on because we were excited to read the scripts and, you know, we're really into the story. I mean, it's still one of my favorite shows. The hours were very long and intense. You know, we'd have like 70-hour work weeks and you basically just have no life for a good 6-7 months. I felt like I was kind of becoming a robot a little bit, and I knew my job, I knew what to do, and I did it, and I went home, and that was life. And it was like, at some point, you know, I didn't feel like I was using my brain, and that became very frustrating and, you know, kind of depressing.
I was somewhat actively seeking something that piqued my interest for whatever reason. You know, I wasn't after anything specific. I didn't have an agenda. I wasn't looking for something necessarily documentary. I wasn't looking for something narrative, but I was just looking for something. And I read this story in the Believer magazine. It was fascinating to me, and so it was always sticking in my head, and that was the first indication to me that this was something unique.
You know, Tim brought that article after he had finished reading it to me and said, you know, you have to read this. This sounds amazing and unbelievable, and wouldn't it kind of be cool to do something? You know, we should see.
The article that beckoned Tim's attention was actually an essay written by author Leslie Jamison. It was featured in the May 2011 issue of The Believer, but it's from a collection of essays written by Leslie called The Empathy Exams. The Believer is a literature, arts, and culture magazine with long-form interviews, essays, and reviews. And Leslie's essay, the one that Tim had found, was Leslie's own personal account of a race called the Barkley Marathons, a race created by a man called Lazarus Lake and his friend Raw Dog. The title of the essay, quote, "The Immortal Horizon. 35 runners face hollers and hells, a flooded prison, rats the size of possums, and flesh-flaying briars to test the limits of self-sufficiency," end quote. These are the rules of the Barkley. A runner has 60 hours to finish 5 loops. The race is said to be 100 miles, but runners say each loop is closer to 26 miles. These are known as Barkley miles, making the race 130 miles. Only a third of the race is on trail. There's a cumulative elevation gain that's nearly twice the height of Mount Everest, and runners have to scale hills with names such as Rat Jaw, Little Hell, Big Hell, Testicle Spectacle, and Coffin Springs, to name a few. The first loop and the second loop are both clockwise, making a day loop and a night loop. Then the third and fourth loops are counterclockwise for another day and a night loop. If you finish 3 loops, this is known as a fun run. And if you make it to the 5th loop, the runner can choose which direction he'd like to go in. That is if you are the first person to do a 5th loop. Otherwise, you have to run the opposite direction of the last person. All this in 60 hours.
Just the statistics of the race itself are pretty ridiculous when you read it. The elevation, you know, 120,000 feet of change, and just all the sort of plain facts of it were pretty ridiculous. But I think what Leslie captured in that article was really like the sense of place. You're sort of immersed in this world that pops up for a weekend every year in the woods of Tennessee that people come from all over the world to experience. And that, I think, she described so well, and it was kind of all-consuming when you were reading it. Like, you really felt like you were there.
Lazarus Lake was first introduced to us via that article, and the article made the place and that person seem mythical or mythological in some way.
I think we actually asked him why he chose Lazarus, and I don't...
We did, and in true form, he'll never give. He'll figure out exactly where you're going and what you want out of your question, and he will go 180 degrees away from that. That was one of the things I asked about him. I was like, it's a very specific name, Lazarus, like rising from the dead, and biblical, and all these different things. And I said, where does that come from? Is this like a rebirth for you? And all this, my mind was just swimming with all these possibilities. And he says, oh, I just like the way it rolled off the tongue.
Lazarus Lake, in the white shirt and the cigarette over there. The guy that hung up all the license plates, he's a dangerous man. He and Raw Dog are the guys that invented this race. They made this race out of nothing, out of thin air.
Who is the mastermind behind the Barkley?
Oh, Raw Dog.
I have suggestions to make it easier, but the harder I protest, the more that eggs him on.
He swears that it's you.
Which kind of leaves me obligated to swear that it's him.
He definitely likes to circumnavigate questions. We've interviewed him a number of times, and there was specifically a time where we knew we had to get certain pieces that were missing. We just need this explained in one sentence. So let's ask him this question. And it was like, oh man, like he knew what we wanted.
I think he enjoyed watching us squirm. Like he wasn't going to make it easy.
Is your fuel gauge broken there?
No.
Okay. We're just on empty.
No, E means excellent. F means you're fucked. It's on E. We're in excellent shape. We have plenty of gas. Boy, how does yours work? Backwards?
I think if we had not met him ahead of time, it might have been more intimidating.
We basically sort of asked, like, can we come down to Tennessee and shoot this documentary? And he kind of responded like, well, it's a public park. I can't stop you. Because it's a very sort of secretive race and it's really important to a lot of people, we wanted what we were doing to not interfere with the race, but also, respect it and have him be part of it. After talking to him, we said, well, we want to do this, we'll come down for a scout a month ahead of time. And is there someone who could show us places along the course that we could shoot, who lives nearby there or something? He said, well, if you pay for my gas, I'll come down there that weekend and I'll show you places where I'm okay with you putting, cameras or a person operating a camera, and I'll take you around. And we're like, okay.
If we weren't going to do it, we were going to have to wait another year. And, we had to make that decision very quickly. Are we going to wait a year and try to prep for that year, or we decide to do this year's, in which case we have to move very quickly. It was only a matter of 7 weeks, I think.
Like Tim said, we could have waited for a year, and my brain works like, I'm like, okay, everything has to be organized, and I need a calendar, and we're going to be prepared, and we're going to, X, Y, Z, like everything in order. Like that's how I like to be prepared. Mm-hmm. And this process was exactly the opposite of that. So we went down for the scout. I was pretty intimidated to meet him. I had read certain things about him where he said, well, a woman will never finish the Barkley because they're too soft and weak to do it. And then as soon as I met him and started talking to him, he's a really smart person. He's a writer. He's an accountant. He's a stonemason. He's a basketball coach. He's been an ultra runner, a big runner his whole life. He says things to push people, to motivate them. So even if he won't admit to the reason why he's doing something or why he's saying something, like, I don't think he actually thinks that a woman is not capable of finishing. I actually think that he really wants to see a woman finish.
You won't see it hidden under his mustache, but he would probably have the biggest smile on his face that day that a woman finishes.
Like Tim always says, we never wanted to cut the camera because he'll always be saying something fascinating. Or
the camera just loves him.
Yeah.
And I love his voice.
Us too.
He's got a great voice.
Yeah. Well, a lot of people think it's $1.60 to enter the race, but that's really not accurate. We charge $1.60 just to apply, and we don't give the $1.60 back, we keep it. And that's my retirement plan. If you get accepted into the race, then your first year when you're a virgin, the first time you come, you have to give us a license plate from your home state or home country. People have often said that you could charge a huge fee and people would pay it and come, but I don't think you would get the same collection of people. You like to have people that will enjoy the race and people that will enjoy each other. And plus, for $1.60 and a license plate, if people have complaints, I can just laugh.
I should also say that we almost didn't go on that scout. We almost didn't actually make the film because this was around the time where Kickstarter was getting really big, and we thought, well, we'll make this documentary and we'll do a Kickstarter project to help fund it. We had a lot of differing opinions about the editing of this video, and
we weren't even started. We didn't even start making the film, and we were having trouble. And I actually had definitely a breakdown in the sense that if this is the way it's going to be, then I don't want to move on. I don't want to even get started with it because, one, I just don't want to spend my days with this feeling and with this frustration. And two, we have a relationship, and I don't want this to affect the relationship. If anything, this should, hopefully enhance it. I do not want to do this every day. I do not want to argue every day.
And we're leaving the next morning for Tennessee.
I mean, at some point I was like, you do it. If you want to continue on, I said, I'll help you or I'll do whatever.
I mean, I was kind of like, we told Laz we were going to be there. I'm not going to not go and meet this guy. Whatever happens, I'm going. But then he changed his mind that morning as we were supposed to leave for the airport.
It might be easier to talk about it now that we're on the other side of it, right? But back then, we really had no idea really even what we were going to do with it or if there was going to be a story. This is really the development phase of something, right? We're just going to collect and to gather information, and the story is going to be found and the story is going to be told later in the editing process. Some people had even asked us while we were there at the event, what is it that you're going to end up with? And I said, to be honest with you, it could be 10 minutes.
We thought, well, what happens if no one finishes? Can we still make a story out of that? We didn't know what was going to happen.
That was the biggest element. Could we create a story, which is the Barkley story? That is really how the legend has grown, right? It's most years nobody finishes.
I'm John Figvaresi. I'm from Pennsylvania. I'm sort of just a poor stipend-funded grad student right now, and this is a great event for that because it only costs $1.60 to do, so this is my first time here. I study glaciology and climate change, paleoclimate actually, so I'm working on a project where we're looking at an ice core from Antarctica. I think you kind of have to come at least hoping to finish. Especially when I think about all that training, I have to at least believe that I could do it. So that's about as best as I could say. I know the odds are super against me, and who knows, but I have to at least say that 60 hours, right? 60 hours.
When we showed up to that scout a month ahead of time, he kind of was like, oh, you guys are here. I guess you're really going to do this. Because other people had said, oh, we're going to make a documentary, and then kind of maybe shot some stuff or just didn't follow through. And so once he got to know us and we got to know him, and we explained really to him what we were trying to do, which was, look, we loved this article and we think it's fascinating and inspiring and compelling, and we want to show the Barkley and what it is without giving away any of its secrets, that he became more involved. Would you say the application process is a secret?
It's not a very good secret because hundreds of damn people are figuring it out.
It's like a series of complicated ninja moves to get in.
Part of the application involves a exam. I've never had to take an exam to get into a race before.
If you're selected, you get a letter of condolences. Sorry to inform you, you've been accepted to run the Barkley.
I think we were also like really naive about what we were getting into. You know, we didn't even go into the film with like a treatment. You know, documentary producers and filmmakers have a treatment. 3 years is a short amount of time for a film. And we thought, oh my God, this is taking forever because, you know, we didn't have time to work on it. Most other documentary filmmakers we met along the way at festivals and stuff. I mean, this is their full-time job. But this was like a side project for us. You know, when I think about that, I mean, that's crazy.
I mean, there are so many factors involved in the reason behind it taking so long for us. And a big part of it, obviously, was time. Because of when we did go back to work, we went back to a 70-hour-a-week job. So we would literally have to take 4, 5, 6 months off at a time without really doing a whole lot of progression on the documentary. The film was not shot in one weekend, even though it might appear that way. It was shot over, multiple time periods in terms of like a lot of the other interviews in multiple states. You know, we traveled a lot to get them.
The main thing that happens is over one weekend. So, yeah, we probably could have finished it sooner, but would it have been the same film we ended up with?
Definitely
Probably not.
The Barkley course is about 1/3 on trail, and that's the formal trail in the park, and 2/3 or more off trail, keeping in mind every year the course is going to change a little bit. The off trail sections are not marked.
Is anything marked?
No, there's no marks. Nothing is marked.
I mean, you get a map, a compass. Can't use GPS. And this year, due to popular demand, they don't get to use altimeters. Whatever you can carry on your back, and you're on your own.
We sort of used that year's race as the sort of skeleton structure of telling about the Barkley. So Laz is obviously, besides the Barkley being the main character, he is the other main character of the film. And then the way that things unfold and a couple characters in the race, a couple of the runners, we introduce and you start to follow them a little bit more.
I'm Brett Mounty. I'm a physicist by training. I do research in semiconductor devices. I finished the Barkley last year. I was a 10th finisher. I feel like I have some unfinished business with not getting the record. The main goal is to try and break flying Brian Robinson's record. 55 hours, 42 minutes, and 27 or 37 seconds, I'm not sure. So that's basically the goal. I mean, and then I guess second to that, just finishing. And then I'd be the only two-time finisher.
We tried to interview absolutely everyone, but there are certain people who, were a little bit concerned about what the documentary might do to the race, and rightfully so. We were concerned about that as well. I think a lot of it has to do, and I say this now because we had a weird experience at one point, but about honesty, about really being honest about what you're there to do. And especially when you're making a documentary about anything, people are putting their trust in you that you're going to tell a story and be fair and not take advantage of people's openness and kindness. And that was really important, that we were honest with them about what we were doing and what we wanted to make.
I think part of it too, we probably didn't think about enough, but right away I think everybody else thinks about is that when you are presenting yourself as doing this thing and you're on the inside, your probably first thought is, well, what are you getting out of it if you're not going to exploit it in some way, right? Like, why are you going to put this effort out? Why are you going to do this thing? And it's actually a good question, right? Because we didn't really know what we were going to end up with. But I think we always did feel that no matter what, like, we didn't want to exploit it. Yes, this is something very special. Yes, we understand that you're holding it very close to your heart and you don't want it to be exploited. but we're asking you to trust us because we don't want that either.
It's a sort of difference, I think, in a way, between a sort of journalist and a documentary filmmaker, maybe, is like, we're not there to get the facts and figures or to tell you what happened. We're there to get this, like, sense of this thing that's out there. That was, you know, one of the things that we made sure. It's like we wanted to be as invisible as possible. We wanted to talk to people, but during the race, like, feel like we weren't there.
As invisible as possible.
That's
the key word. We weren't invisible.
Right, we weren't invisible, but we were as invisible as possible.
Yeah.
You know, a news crew was there while we were shooting that race, and this guy was like trying to talk to people while they're, you know, between loops. And I pulled him aside and I was like, look, I don't think you should, you know, maybe don't talk to them or bother them. Like, they're doing something really intense right now, and now is not the time to bother these people.
And
like,
they're under the clock, too.
They're under the clock. Like, what are you doing?
As you probably know, the course adds up to each loop is 20.00 miles. And every time the course changes, somehow it's still 20.00 miles, even if he's directly added something.
Maybe it's both. Maybe it's exactly 20 miles and maybe it's a bit more. That's probably about as true as you can get.
Part of the whole adventure is having a little uncertainty, having to use your route finding skills. We do it twice clockwise, a daytime loop clockwise, a nighttime loop clockwise, and then a daytime loop counterclockwise and a nighttime loop counterclockwise. Finishing the fifth loop, we send them out in opposite directions. The first guy who leaves on the fifth loop can go either way he wants, clockwise or counterclockwise. But the next person has to go the opposite direction.
Every loop you're doing is going to be unique because of the time of the day and the direction.
I just hope to slog it out and get to the end. Really, that's my whole objective. I think I'd be thrilled if I could finish 5 laps. So that's it. Try to have the best time that I can out there, but I'm not going into this thinking it's going to be fun, to be honest.
If you're going to quit, you know you're going to quit. Quit somewhere where there's a trail by you.
Quit. If you're going to quit early.
No, don't quit early, or don't quit at all, because you got to do 5. But I mean, if you're out here, because it took us, I think, 4 hours just to get back. That's after you quit.
I just don't want to get so lost that it becomes like embarrassing that I end up having to get airlifted out or something, and become one of those stories of miserable failures. I just want to be a regular failure like everyone else.
Well, you know, the record for futility is poor Dan Baglione, who covered 2 official miles on the course and was out there for 32 hours.
So I now hold the record for the slowest absolute pace ever at Barkley, 16 hours per mile.
You know, the world that we live in is very homogenized, or becoming more and more so. Even from the time when I was growing up to now, you know, there used to be, the country was very regional in the sense that you go to another place and you really experience something different. And that, you know, it's hard to say for better or worse, but that has certainly changed and changing. Like, the Barkley is the anti-commercial event.
Yeah, no one gets paid. There's no staff. I mean, it's Laz and Raw Dog, and someone comes and brings a tent who lives nearby. You don't win anything from finishing. You know, it costs $1.60. It's like all these pieces that were, wow, this is refreshing. We're not runners. We're not ultra runners. But even in that world of ultra running, you know, it costs hundreds of dollars to get into races, and you have a crew that helps you, and pacers and all these people, and you get a medal at the end, and, you know, you can post your results and all this sort of stuff. And this is the one that's like, no, this is something different. And the people who want to do this are, you know, different in a way.
The most important thing is, how did you sleep last night?
4 minutes? Oh, I slept like a baby.
Nice, because that's what's important.
That's what's important. I knew when it would start.
Don't be shy. Step on up. Step right up.
What has Laz's reception of the film been like?
He seems to love it.
He does. He doesn't seem to. He loves it. He's very excited about it.
Very excited for us in the sense that he feels like the movie is so good that everybody in the world is going to see it and buy 30 copies. And he jokes with us that we'll be driving in Ferraris. And
so when Laz finally actually did see the final version, it was the night before another race he holds in that area called the Barkley Fall Classic. And so we showed the film, and it was him seeing the full version for the first time. And he was like, whoa, like, this is like a real movie, you know? It was like he couldn't believe it. It was like, wow.
You have to, I guess, look at it from his perspective, right? This is something that he created, and it's been going on for a long time. I mean, it'll be its 30th year coming up. And to see someone else's perspective on it, and then to see it in kind of like the surreal world of a theater on a screen with an audience, you know, it's definitely like sort of outside of probably anything he had sort of imagined 29 years ago.
His whole point with everything that he does is, like, what are you doing? Like, how far can you push your limits? You know, what are you scared of doing? Or what do you think you can't do? You know, are these things actually impossible?
All right, we got about a minute to go. This would be the part of the race where they give you lots of good advice. If y'all would take good advice, you wouldn't be here. So, in about 50 seconds, we're going to light a cigarette.
Like all great races in traditional history, we light a cigarette and that means they're off.
Well, he writes a lot about like competition, how that's meaningful, and, you know, failure and what that means. And I hope overall, and I think part of the reason why he's excited about it is not necessarily just about, you know, the race or the film, but like that his sort of message is coming across of, you know, failure is important, and there are all these differing layers of success and failure. And what is most important? Is it most important that someone else is telling you that you've succeeded even though you feel like you failed? Or is it more important that you feel like you succeeded when someone else says that they think you failed? There are a lot of things you can do nowadays to avoid challenges or avoid things that you think you're going to fail at. And, you know, he created a race that's almost impossible. What's the point of doing something that's almost impossible? Well, it's to see, you know, how far you can push yourself. And at the end of it, are you going to feel like a failure because you didn't finish? Well, maybe. Or you're going to be like, wow, I went farther than I thought I could.
And I bet next time I can go even further.
Right.
And I never would have known that if I didn't try, you know.
You know, making this film, we always relate it. It's like our own personal Barkley, because everything that could have gone wrong went wrong. Literally everything. It's the hardest thing that we've ever done. It took forever to finish. So many like stumbling blocks along the way, and frustration and anger and tears. And like, I don't know if I ever could have done that, you know, if we knew how much difficulties and work we were getting into when we started it. And now it's like, I have this like itch. It was like, as hard as this was, I was like, okay, what am I going to do next?
She hasn't said that before. That's a good sign. Like, we're coming out of the tunnel.
The tunnel of darkness. Like, we came through the other side, which I definitely would probably not have been able to do if Tim hadn't been working on this. Like, you really find out a lot about yourself, maybe when you go through a creative process of like what you need to work on as a human being, which is really important. I think that if you're not challenging yourself in those ways, you don't have to see those things as much.
We are different people than we were 4 years ago. You are, by choice, you know, forcing yourself into these situations, and you do have these fight or flight moments, and each one, just like in the movie, will change you based on that decision that you're making. Will you stay and fight and see where you can get? And maybe tomorrow you'll get knocked down, but maybe not. Maybe it'll be 2 days before you get knocked down again.
If you're going to face a real challenge, it has to be a real challenge. You can't accomplish anything without the possibility of failure. Pretty much everybody you see go out there, you really want them to succeed. You know that most of them won't. And there is kind of a maybe a dark humor to all the things that go on. Some of the failures are spectacular and really funny. But you like to see people have the opportunity to really find out that something about themselves.
We always say like 99% of people who are going to see this film are not going to want to do the Barkley. There are always that percentage of people who are going to want to, and that's fine, but they still have to figure out how to get in.
We did our best to not make a running film. And in the end, we can't deny that the film is a running film, but by trying to not make one, we probably made a better running film, if that makes any sense.
I would put it in the genre of documentary / psychological thriller.
That's good. We should have used that as our tag.
That's really funny. It's a sports dramedy documentary.
Yeah. Dark humor, psychological thriller.
This episode of Mostly Minutia was recorded on location at Epiphany Space in Hollywood, California. Epiphany Space is a not-for-profit co-working space. You can find more information on Epiphany at epiphanyspace.com. Thank you and congratulations to Annika, Iltis, and Timothy Kane. Their film has now won a few awards, including winner of Best Documentary at the Kansas City Film Festival, Top 20 Audience Favorite at Hot Docs, and the Audience Award at both the Austin Film Festival and the Sheffield Adventure Film Festival. The Barkley Marathons, the race that eats its young, is now available digitally worldwide on iTunes, Amazon, Google Play, and Vudu. You can buy it on DVD and Blu-ray through barkleymovie.com, or if you'd like to host a screening for your community or your local theater, Annika and Tim have teamed up with a web platform called Tug. Tug teams up with local theaters to help bring the movies you want to you. You can find out more information on barkleymovie.com. Much of the beautiful music featured today was written and composed by Tyler Gibbons for the movie, and the song playing underneath this was written and performed by Tyler and his wife Robin for their group Red Heart the Ticker. The song is called Flock's First Time, and it's from the album Oh My, Mountains. You can find more Red Heart the Ticker on iTunes or rhtt.net. The other composer featured today is Chris Zabriskie. Chris makes all sorts of minimalistic music that I love. You can find more information on Chris at chriszabriskie.com. Zabriskie. If you're interested in reading Leslie Jamison's essay, The Immortal Horizon, head to believermag.com. The Believer also has a podcast called The Organist and a blog called The Believer Blogger. You can find more of Leslie's work, including the empathy exams, at lesliejamison.com. And as always, you can find links to all of these, plus photos from the Barkley on my site, colleenlindell.com. Lastly, Laz, if you're listening, it was conclusive during our interview that Annika, Timothy, and myself love your voice, and we think it's in your best interest to start putting your books on tape so that we can download them and listen to them in the hustle of LA traffic.